What up, Wizards? It's Dev and the Chicken, and today we've got what should be a quick, fun, and informative little video for you. What else is YouTube for, right? You see, you may not have heard, but Final Fantasy Mtg set just came out. It's a Magic set, but it's got Final Fantasy guys. Crazy. Now, if you are one of the very few people in the world who has heard about this set, then you may have also heard that the prices on the booster boxes are crazy, and the prices on the individual cards are also kind of crazy, depending on which ones you want to actually buy. Some of them have actually fallen through the floor. But anyway, a lot of talk about the prices of this set one way or the other. But what a lot of people aren't talking about is how a lot of cards that aren't Final Fantasy cards have also gone way up in price. They're not even Final Fantasy cards. What's up with that? Well, it's because all the Final Fantasy cards work super well with a bunch of cards that were like 30 cents, and now they're all $10. So maybe today, though, how I should frame this is that we're going to go through your collection and see if you own cards that you didn't know are worth a bunch of money now as of like 2 weeks ago. And it ain't just Moon Mist. A lot of people know about this one. It went up to a whole $1.50. Actually, for a second there, it was like $4 or $5, but it's gone back down to $1.50. But that's still kind of impressive when you consider that sometime in April it was like 35 cents. It was about the same price as a Fago Moon Mist, but now it's about the price of a Fago Moon Mist 6-pack for just one copy of Moon Mist. Oh, and by the way, in case you hadn't seen that Moon Mist had spiked yet, then yeah, it's because there's a lot of humans in this set that would transform for like 6 or 7 mana, but you can make them all transform at the same time with Moon Mist. It's kind of cool, but there's a lot of other cards that have spiked way harder than Moon Mist over the last month or so here, and let's take today to talk about those. Here are 10 cards that have spiked because of Final Fantasy.
And I'm your favorite Magic Channel's favorite Magic Channel. Best believe that the professor go bananas for my deck tech.
And we're back. In fact, we are so back. Do the kids still say that? I don't think so. Good. Anyway, we have an HM for this list in like giant air quotes here. This is really just us talking about 10 cards in no particular order, all of which spiked harder than a scene in Train Spotting. These are all cards that spiked harder than the floor in Bowser's Castle. And again, they're in no particular order, but if I had to have an HM for this thing, it would probably be the card I'm most upset about, and that is Harmonic Prodigy. You see, this little lady went from $4 to $12 almost overnight. Over the course of a couple of weeks, this thing crept more and more up from $4 to $7 to $10 to $12, and I'm not actually sure it's about to stop, you know? I'm kind of kicking myself really hard on this one because as I was building Black Waltz number 3 during the preseason, got EDH Rec open on one tab, Card Kingdom open on the other tab. I'm looking at stuff and writing things down in my handy-dandy notebook, and this card was like $3.50 at the time. And now it's been a couple of weeks, and if I want to order a copy of this, it now costs me what a playset would have cost me when I was building the deck in the first place. I probably should have gone ahead and pulled the trigger on you, kid. But now I don't get to play this unless I want to spend a bunch of money in my Black Waltz number 3 deck, or my Kuja Genome Sorcerer deck, which it also goes well in, or my Tella Great Sage deck, which is also a wizard, or either of my Kefka decks, because that's also a wizard. This just works with so much stuff in this set, because there's a whole bunch of wizards, you know? So, and they're all really tempting to re-trigger with Harmonic Prodigy. So, again, I'm a big dumb sucker. I'm a mark. I didn't grab this card when I probably should have, and now I'm paying the price. Now, the next couple of cards we're going to talk about didn't spike nearly as hard as Harmonic Prodigy, but I'm also not anywhere near as angry about them doing so. So, with that in mind, let's talk about some of the stuff that's been boosted by all these summon sagas in Final Fantasy, beginning with old Tommy Bombs over here, Tom Bombadil. He spikes like once every 8 months, you know, and he'll calm back down, but he hasn't really calmed back down since Final Fantasy actually hit the streets, you know. This thing went from about $1.50 to near $5 because it's such an awesome commander for sagas, and we just got some really, really good sagas. And even though going from $1 to $5 isn't like a huge jump, it's still like 500%. So that's a pretty good spike, but the same thing happened to Barbara Wright over here, and as a matter of fact, she kind of spiked harder. Right now, this card is like $4.25 or something, which doesn't seem like very, very much, but when you consider that it was like 25 cents a couple of weeks ago, that is a massive spike. But it is easy to see why Barb spiked, you know. All of these summons look really great if you get to read ahead on them, especially like Bahamut. If you just get to cast Giga Flare when it enters the battlefield, that seems like it could win a game or two for you. So, again, I can see why Barb is here. But these aren't the only cards that spiked and yet remained fairly reasonable if you really, really need one. We also saw inventory management, or, as the Brits might say, inventory management. I've always liked it said that way a little bit more, but if you say it that way in America, people are like, Why'd you do that? So I just think you're onto something with the pronunciation here, UK people. But one way or the other, inventory management, it rolls off the tongue a lot better, is obviously an incredible card for equipment stacks. And it's not the only equipment or equipment-based card that spiked. The 6-mana Nahiri underwent another small spike. But of all the equipment's cards, I believe that this one underwent one of the largest spikes in terms of percentage, from less than $1. Not too much less than $1. It was like 85 cents, up to $5. So again, just like Tommy Bombs and Miss Barbara Wright, this one is stayed reasonable if you really need a copy of it in your deck, but when you really look at the percentages that it skyrocketed, they're pretty dazzling. Use the word dazzling in a YouTube video. Gonna have to check that one off my life bingo list later. But anyway, we also got to see some spikes from a bunch of bird stuff. There's birds in the set and they're chocobos, but they all care about birds, which is really, really cool for a number of commander decks. And so because of that, we saw some cards undergo massive spikes on the level we haven't quite seen yet in this video, right? Like Soulcatcher's Eyrie went from about $1 or so, mostly because it's a cool old rare, all the way to $10 because of how well it works with all these new bird synergies. But that's not the only thing. There was also Keeper of the Gales, a card that I'm actually playing in Tawnos the Toymaker right now. By the way, Tawnos has not spiked. This copies all the bird spells that you cast. I would have assumed Tawnos would spike, but everyone's just like, nah. But Keeper of the Gales went from also $1 all the way to $11. Actually, I think this card was less than $1. I think it was like 50 cents. And now it's $11 to buy this basically a trade win rider, but birds instead. Kind of what this does, And I honestly think that's way too much of a spike. Kind of hope it cools down because that's a ridiculous price for this card. It honestly is. But still, if you wanted to play birds in Commander, they're going to make sure that it's as expensive as possible to buy all your janky old rares. And I honestly think that's not fair. But in case you already have a couple of copies of these things sitting around your boxes in your house, and now you're a little bit richer. But there are a couple of commanders, like from the Precon commander product, that require upgrading, and so as a result, those upgrades have gone through the freaking roof. Stuff like Danny Pink, for instance, which in the Tidus deck, and by the way, I have looked all over YouTube for a clip of Waka going, Tidus, and I can't find one anywhere, and I'm starting to wonder if it's some sort of Mandela effect, and he never says it in FF10, or at least he never says it that way. I just cannot find a clip. All previous season, I've been trying to find just a little bit, like a half a second, Tidus, and it's not on YouTube. So somebody put it on YouTube or tell me if that even happens in the game ever. It really should, but either way, I'm way off subject at this point. The Tidus deck lets you move counters around on creatures and stuff like that, and also proliferate, which will be important for especially the next card we talk about. This will basically draw all of the cards Danny Pink will. So as a result, it's gone from like $4, just like Harmonic Prodigy, all the way up to $12, just like Harmonic Prodigy. It's actually not the first time that Danny has spiked before. This has happened in the past, actually the very recent past, but every new set that comes out, just Danny does something really cool with a card in that set, and in this case, again, it's an upgrade for a Precon, and when those are rare and highly sought after, they tend to go up a little bit, and that's exactly what happened to Dan the Man over here. But it also happened to Arwen, Mortal Queen from the Lord of the Rings set. This thing went from, let me just double check my prices on this one. Yeah, this one went from 50 cents to $16, which I believe is the second highest percentage rise in the entire video. Pretty impressive. This puts indestructible counters on stuff, and it can move the indestructible counter around, but so can Tidus, and well, Tidus can also proliferate the counter on, and can copy it, like put more indestructible counters on stuff. It's wild. So obviously Arwen is kind of like best friends with Tidus, and so you have to kind of play that in the Tidus deck. Basically everyone that wants to play Tidus, and it's a very, very popular Precon, it turns out, is buying a copy of Arwen, and that'll definitely drive the price of a card up. Apparently some unknown percentage, some unknown thousands of percentage. I'm not doing the math on it, but going from 50 cents to $16 is pretty impressive. If you've already got an Arwen or two, maybe cash in a copy, go on vacation, or at least like a feel better drink. I don't know what your go-to is, maybe go to Jeremiah's and get yourself a gelati. Not a sponsor, I just really like Jeremiah's. But anyway, I guess we're in the top 3 of this video, if you want to call it that. And there is another Precon commander that's making waves and really spiking some especially old school Magic cards. Ishtola over here looks like a banging commander, dude. Like, not only am I a fan of a cat lady from time to time, but also This just like drains your opponent out and all you have to do is cast spells. And that sounds like a really good Saturday night to me, and maybe even a good Tuesday night. I'd like to try it. But anyway, this has spiked a bunch of cards that, you know, already seem okay, but just aren't seeing the play they should. And I think the best example is Sigil of Sleep. I had actually just recently put this in my Codis, the Fangkeeper deck. It's pretty sick there. Basically, any sort of Voltron commander that cares about enchantments and can get through unblocked easily, Sigil of Sleep is a nice little value card for. But if you're playing it in Ishtola, it goes beyond a nice little value card. Because you'll note that Sigil of Sleep doesn't actually say the creature has to deal combat damage, and it hasn't been oracle texted to fix that issue. It's just whenever the creature deals damage. So Ishtola is constantly dealing damage to everybody, meaning that you are constantly bouncing stuff back to people's hands, which seems like the most annoying thing in the entire world. But I support it. I've always been kind of a huge fan of Sigil of Sleep. And did you know that I own 7 copies of this card somehow? Mostly because I still have a lot of my like old like commons and stuff from when I was a kid. I sold a lot of my rares forever ago, but I've still got a lot of my old like random crap from Urza's Destiny. And so suddenly I am the owner of like 8 to 10 copies of a card that's $8 to $10. So I guess I could be pretty happy about that, but it's also a card I really like. So I'm kind of a fan that it finally got the recognition it deserved. It's always been a cool card. But we'll finish things off with a couple of commanders from the main set here that are really spiking the prices of, again, some pretty old school cards that you probably haven't thought about in a really long time, like Artificer's Intuition, which is currently being spiked by Noctis. You see, Noctis lets you play artifact cards out of your graveyard, and Artificer's Intuition lets you discard artifacts into your graveyard to go tutor up more artifacts. Just peanut butter and ladies. Perfect synergy. Go together like Luigi and Princess Daisy, and as a result, Artificer's Intuition has spiked from about $1 or so all the way up to $9.50 over the last week or so here. And that is a pretty big spike right there. It's not the largest spike in the entire video, but it is one of my favorite little bits of synergy that we'll look at in this video. I've had a few people in my chat and in my comments section tell me they were excited about Noctis. I wasn't too sure about it, but when it digs up cool pieces like this that obviously work so well with it, yeah, I can start getting behind Noctis. But I saved number 1 for the most massive spike of the previous season by a huge margin, even more than that Arwen spike. 50 cents to $16 was really, really crazy, but nothing's been anywhere near as crazy as Quicksilver Elemental's Ascent over this previous season. This works really, really well with Vivi, and as a result, it's gone from about 35 cents for a pretty forgotten little old school rare all the way up to $30 from 30 cents to $30, and it's actually closer to like $32 at time of writing. What is that, like 10,000%? I don't even know if I'm being hyperbolic here, but maybe I am. Let me know if I'm a giant idiot in the comments section, which I don't have to tell you to do. You always do it. Even if I say something objectively correct, people are like, what a dummy. But most of you are very nice to me down there. I appreciate that. But anyway, in case you haven't seen this, Quicksilver Elemental just basically generates infinite mana once you have it and a Vivi out. All you really have to do is target Vivi with Quicksilver Elemental's ability, which means you can activate Vivi's ability with your Quicksilver Elemental. Do that, add some mana to your pool, and then just activate Quicksilver Elemental's ability again and choose Vivi again, and it will think that it's a different Vivi than it was the first time, so that means it gets to use the ability again, and you just do this over and over and over until you generate as much red or blue or whatever as you want. And 2-card infinite mana combos are all right, pretty good in Commander if you can get them slapped together. And this one's actually really hard to interact with. If you have the Vivi on the table and you resolve the Quicksilver Elemental, at that point, I guess they can try to interact with it, but you just generate infinite mana anyway while their removal spells on the stack or whatever. So, seems okay. Seems like it might be a pretty decent combo, and there's a reason this is spiked so hard. And if you just happen to have a bunch of copies of Quicksilver Elemental back there in a box somewhere, congratulations. Seriously, Mr. Moneybags, you've come up in the world and you haven't changed at all. That's very impressive. But if you got a copy for your Vivi deck while they were still 35 cents to $1, then like again, congratulations. You definitely feel like you made out on that end of the deal. But that is it, everybody. That is a whole bunch of cards what spoked because of Final Fantasy. That's good conjugation. We are cooking with that conjugation. But anyway, that's just let me know if you spotted any other cards that spiked. I think there were a few more that I didn't quite have room for in this video. There's always going to be cards that spike when a set comes out, but Final Fantasy has really delivered in terms of creating value for older cards. So if you're a speculator and you saw any of these coming, again, congrats on your mansion. But anyway, that's all I've got for this one. Just do all the YouTube stuff on your way out. Make sure that you hit the button shaped like a thumb. Hard to miss down there. Maybe sub to the sandwich, trying to get to 150K. We are very close to the next 1,000, so help us get there. But apart from that, I have a Patreon. If you want to help out around here, it's just $1 a month to do so. Nothing else in the entire world costs $1. Nothing. We're way past that at this point in human history. So if you want to spend $1 and actually get some value, right? You can't do that anymore. Then go over to the Patreon, link in the description, and you can vote on what content we do all through Final Fantasy season and beyond if you want to stay a supporter. But anyway, that's all I've got for this one, guys. I will catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.